Hi, my name is Doug Hart. I am owner of Hyrdogen Dukebox Music, which is a record label, but we also manage bands and we also do a little bit of publishing. We generally, whatever can keep you going.
So how did you get into this then?
I got into this mainly from being a musician. So I was in bands in the 80s, and and uh, and then I think by in about 1991, had this mad idea of starting a record label, mainly because I love records. And at that point, it was like, let's do a 7-inch and see how it goes. And rather weirdly, our first ever 7-inch, which we just took round in a car to certain shops, they sold, and people were ringing up saying, have you got any more? And I was thinking, this is really weird, because we didn't even know what promotion was, apart from actually handing out some flyers. But such was the hunger for records in those days. But so that led to one thing, led to another, and then we had a record label that was, very successful, had members of staff in a building, and then about 1998, 1999, started getting into management, and so the record label became a bit more niche, and really, since then we've basically released records on behalf of artists quite a lot. So we're a record label for an act. So we work with them, and it's very much like what they would call a services deal, but a bit more elaborate because we care.
So just give us an idea who you've managed.
We manage a band called Smoke Fairies, who are sort of an alternative folk band. We've been with them for 10 years. I work with the Susan the Banshees Estate and work with them. We do a band called Samana, a band called Dolls, and we also manage a few producers like Tom Dalgetty, who did Ghost, Killing Joke, etc. So one thing you learn in this industry is that it's very, if you stand still, you'll get eaten.
So
just like yeah.
you were the Smoke Fairies. Things were going really well.
Yeah, Smoke Fairy is a very classic example, actually, of COVID and the impact of COVID. I mean, they're probably, unfortunately, one of the greatest examples. So we've been with them for 10 years, been with various record labels, and in that role, obviously, just being managers. And then for the latest album, which came out earlier this year, we elected to be the label. So we set up a label, which is exactly the same as any other record label we've ever run. So we've got press, radio, online press, student press, you name it. We've got regional press. Everyone's on board, and for the first time ever, we get to a point which is no label's ever got to us, where we're number 1 in this and number 10 in this, and we're selling records. We're touring, all the shows sell out, and I came back on a train from Manchester in the middle of February, and then went on holiday for 2 weeks. When I came back on the 29th of February, it was obvious things were going to go bad, and I think, like a myriad of other bands, unfortunately, COVID came in, and essentially, because it was such a meteoric worldwide pandemic that no one's ever known in a science fiction level, is I think the distraction was just so much, and just the knee-jerk reaction of shops shutting, no one doing anything, everyone obviously watching the news like they're in a Hollywood film for weeks. A lot of bands just their latest releases just didn't seem to matter. I mean, the week before lockdown, we had our first ever billboard campaign went up in London. So we've never done that before. So we had 2 billboards, fantastic, with number 1 record, fantastic, all the reviews, like amazing, best thing they've ever done, you name it, it was all great. And then no one saw them because everyone was locked up. But you had to laugh, otherwise you cry. So, I mean, they are a classic example of COVID in terms of the impact of it on an already running campaign.
So what did you try? Did you try to do anything to try and kickstart?
Yeah. So moving on from there, obviously we did what we could. So we did some online streamed shows, but all very, them at home, all very embryonic because, no one really had the chance to sort anything out. That was the thing that was interesting, was watching people's streams starting off pretty badly, technically, and then becoming better and better and better. In fact, actually, a mate of mine who's a sound engineer, he said to me, the one thing that the pandemic has proved, that everyone underappreciates good sound engineers, because suddenly all these people that you go and see live and you think they're amazing are playing in their front end and you can't hear what they're doing. So it was quite scary. So that's all we could do, and do as much as we can in terms of social media. So like posting stories, but engagement. The trouble is, not only have you got the fact that a lot of the wheels have fallen off the wagon, but you've also got the fact that the engagement in social media, as much as people said, keep doing it, I think people were more interested in people listing their 10 favourite albums or the 27 gigs they'd been to or hadn't been to. It turned into a very strange time. And there's winners and losers. I'm sure there's been some winners. Nick Cave's a winner, I think.
Yeah, but artists of a certain status.
Yeah. I think also, not wanting to get too political about it, but if COVID's also done anything, it's underlined the whole thing of the more famous and the richer will get richer, and the less famous and the poorer will get poorer. It's quite simple, because established acts have got somewhere to go. Because if they do something online, people focus, as Nick Cave proved. And the worry. Well, there's a million worries actually. We bite off one lump at a time. But in terms of so it's difficult.
So you've obviously had to make an awful lot of. You've had to adapt in an awful lot of ways.
Sorry, I missed that.
You've had to adapt in a lot of ways to try and keep things running.
Yes, we had to adapt a lot, and also within that, we had other acts doing things like Dolls. We released an EP. We've got a band called Samana. We started to release an EP. And you had to make the decision with embryonic acts that, of course, live's missing. So one of the massive strings to the bow, live, is missing. So you've got to start thinking outside the box. So, people have got to make elaborate videos. They've got to do things that are, engaging. And that's all you can do, really. And I think that's what people are trying.
Watching the way Rasheen Murphy has almost reignited her career through her on her stream shows.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it's actually going to be beneficial to some artists. And I wonder whether, from a management perspective, there'll be a sense of, right, how are we going to get the Rasheen Murphy effect on our focus?
Oh yeah, I think for heritage acts it's quite easy. I think for heritage acts, and she is a heritage act. You don't really think of her as being so, but
no,
she's got a fan base. So anyone who's got a fairly large fan base, if they do the right things, they can tap into it quite quickly and quite effectively. And we've seen quite a lot of bands doing that. Whether it's selling T-shirts or selling, whatever they're selling, like tickets for a stream show, releasing products or whatever. But the new acts are few and far between, and we've had a few little blips, like and let's face it, the things that have been successful are things like Record Store Day and Record Care Day or Day of the Record or Record of the Month or Year, or all those things have been great. But look at the acts who have got their records listed. How many more television personalities albums do you want? Probably quite a few for a lot of people.
Well, there's a problem with the Record Store Day is how much the major labels have taken over, and you can't get stuff pressed up quickly.
Yeah. Well, at the moment you've got the double-edged sword of the fact that majors have, to some point it's a good thing, obviously, but they're playing the game. But obviously they've got a lot of finances, so they do a lot of things in one go, which has sort of pushed out the independents slightly in just terms of the sheer quantity of stuff available. It's a difficult one, but I think it's a positive thing, but it's being run in a rather strange tail wagging the dog way almost.
This is going to be for music management students.
Yeah.
So let's just think what, or if you're sitting at readying a campaign as a manager, what are all the things that you have to deal with? Push COVID to one side for a second.
Right, okay.
In the land BC.
Yeah, well, I mean, releasing a record is really, for want of a better description, almost a horrific catch-22, because you go out, you find the best, find a press officer that's into it, that's got a record, you find a really good radio plugger, depending on what sort of record you've got. But let's say we've got a record that has a chance at Radio 6 playlist. Let's say that we're talking about someone that is slightly pop-centric, but maybe not that pop-centric. So someone who's going to get liked. So yeah, you basically all the time you're going for radio plays, and what you tend to find is that you put a tour on sale. Your hardcore fans go and buy tickets, then the next bout of tickets is all about radio play and press, and it's a never-ending juggling game of the press people saying that they need more radio to get the press, and the radio people saying they need more press to get the radio. One of the great gels is you get a really good online company, so that generates quite a good wodge of interest in the right places, and then slowly it's just a game, and that's what's so frustrating, is that we all, all us people out here, the 20%ers, as we like to call ourselves, we just sit around trying to think of ways of thinking outside the box and breaking that deadlock. And occasionally, the classic one is everyone sits around, and it's almost like one of those horrible, like something out of some film when there's people sitting around a table deciding who's going to die next. But it's like literally, you sit around a table and you're like, okay, what we need is a film sync, someone will say, and you'll go, yeah, sure we do, and like, yep, we need a film sync. Yep, that's good. But so we get a film sync tomorrow. The film comes out in 6 months' time. Is that going to help? And they're like, oh, don't know really. Okay, of course it'll help, but it's a dream. Everyone wants the dream.
But if you were going for the film sync, what would your process be?
Say that again, sorry?
Go for the film sync. What is your process?
To get a film sync?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we publish as well to an extent. So there's a sync. I mean, there's a myriad of people involved in a band. When you see two people walk on stage, you're talking about hundreds, really, of people across the teams at the back, and not necessarily the immediate team, but it goes on and on. So with film syncs, we use several companies. We use a company in America who we send all the masters to. They're constantly pushing for like HBO, Netflix, of course, now is a big player. So all of the music supervisors, they all like music. They all have a heritage act. And what you're always trying to, with a new act, you're always trying to say, our new act is really important because, and then what you're trying to do is circumnavigate the thing, well, really, we need you too in this because the demographic of the film is we're going to spend money, so you've got to get the right type of film, and in some cases it works brilliantly, and sometimes it doesn't work brilliantly, but we've just got an act, we've got a few syncs coming up. They're not massive, but they're great. That was basically us and the publishers, because all publishers have a music sync team, so they have a bunch of people around the world. All they do is keep friendly with music supervisors and send the music all the time and say, look, does this fit? So it's an interesting thing, the world of sync. I mean, I know a guy really well. He used to work in publishing, has now gone out on his own. And he said, I said, what's the secret of getting a sync? Because obviously everyone wants syncs. I mean, it's a dream. Once you get a really good sync, it can mean a lot. Not only the money, but the knock-on effects of people integrating into people's lives. And he said it's very easy, right? You just got to make sure that you've got a bit of music or a song that either fits in with love, death, hate, or revenge. And I was like, what? And he repeated it about 3 times, and it's really stuck with me. And if you think about it, when you watch a film and there's music, if it works, it's because it does actually more or less do those 4 things. It either bonds 2 people together, it pulls 2 people apart, it's the background theme to a fight or some sort of event. It's quite interesting. It's such a simple thing, but such a complex thing. But it's a complicated process, and one, you know, that you have to go for it.
Yeah.
And of course, putting COVID back into it hasn't really affected the world of things that much, because people are still editing, making, and trying to generate films. So people are still using music. Because we've got a bit of a backlog when cinemas are all shutting, but other than that, it should be fine.
At least we've got Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix.
So, to be a good manager, what does it need? What does it require?
I think just to listen. Actually, I think I've got a business partner, and we work very closely together. And I think it's listening. I think, you know, you meet a lot of people in this world that don't listen, and it's not. I'm not saying it's not like saying listen in a sort of condescending way at all. It's like literally always remember there's people around you that know way, way, way more than you do. So I think that's very important. Like, so if you've got someone who's a sync bloke brings up and says that, listen, I think it's really good, but have you got an instrumental? You've got to go, well, he knows what he's doing. Let's get him an instrumental. And sometimes it's a very simple thing, and sometimes it could be a much bigger thing, especially in the world of social media. Like my business partner is way, way better at social media than me. He's really into the analytics. He bores me to tears talking about algorithms and how you can do this, and how if you put money behind this bit, you can do that. And basically what you realise is that a lot of things aren't what you seem, and they are just incredibly acute and technical marketing. Which is a good thing, but it's, you know, we grew up without that. Our incredibly acute marketing was going down the pub and someone going, "Here, have you heard that Killing Joke record?" So it's not quite the same anymore.
Yes, it's not, is it? So also, I imagine it's important to develop a network of trusted professionals.
Yeah, for sure. You do tend to find. There's two things here. Advice I was given when I first started, but there's two things that, you know, you tend to work with people more than once. Very few times have I ever fallen out with anyone, and essentially, yeah, you have to trust them, and you have to listen again. I mean, if someone's saying to you, "This is not gelling," and Radio 6 don't want to do this with it or whatever, you can't shout down the phone and say, "No, you're wrong," because you're not. They're not wrong. So all you've got to try and do is think outside the box and say, right, you know, what can we do to help? You know, what else do we need? What other tools do we need? And then push. And one of the great bits of advice I got when I first ever started out on this, once I went from on stage to off stage, as it were, is that someone said to me, just remember one thing, Doug. Anyone you meet on the way up, you're going to meet on the way down. And I was like, Jesus Christ, that is really weird. And it's quite true. It's like, so you don't shout or upset people, because just listen, reason. Yeah, it's like there's loads of famous cliches that always happen in this world, and that is one of them.
I think it's 25, 26 years since we first met, and here we are again.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long old time. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you were right. How do I put this? Our students are graduating into an industry where they had great plans, and now it's a completely different world, but they still want to work in the environment. What advice would you give them?
What advice? Well, I think in the music industry, it's not doomed. It's not doomed. Music will always. It's like alcohol. It's always going to be there to some extent. So, I think. You know, the problem you've got at the moment is over the next 2 years, the live industry is going to struggle. Because not only have you got venues disappearing, you've got service industry disappearing, like tour bus companies, lighting companies, you've got tour managers and a myriad of people that go on the road who are going to be forced to look for other jobs. Hopefully within the industry, but, you know, I heard the other day of someone that I know fairly well, a friend of a friend, who's been trying to get a job in WH Smith's, because things are bad. So the live side is the waiting game. So my advice at the moment would be not to give up and look at some of the industries that are slightly less COVID related. really. I mean, there's a whole design element, you know, being involved in production, because people are still going to make stuff. They're still part of the industry. It's another whole area of people sitting around in offices that no one thinks about. There's production, there's publishing, which is a great industry to be in, because, you know, regardless of what happens in the physical world or the digital world, people still want songs. People still will write songs. People will still publish songs. People still cover songs. So there's a publishing side. That's a good one. You know, and also be aware of the live industry, because at some point, I think there's going to be a lot of openings in it. So it's a good time now to reach out to people and put yourself on the map. If you've got a good CV, or you've got a good want, or a good, you know, you've got a good string to your bow. If there's some strength or something you really love doing, just go and say hello. I mean, in working free for a little while always helps. There's labels, small labels. Yeah. Also, the labels are the sort of BMG size. They're on the up. They're looking for people, because, you know, what they're doing is they're taking on heritage acts, and you know, once they're turning over the money and it's working, they're obviously going to get into younger acts, people that they're going to try and break, or actually, you know, at some point, anyone established, because of the way social media works, and everyone's drowning until you get out the water. And as people come out the water, I think more and more and more we're going to see people trying to embrace that and work with it, whether that's a sort of 360 publishing music, management deal or whatever. But management's also a good thing to get into. Go and work for a management company. I mean, it's difficult. And, you know, as a management, you know, if you're a management company, which I've never quite managed to even want, really, because I think it's just, for me, that's a different level of. I love music so much that I don't think I could do it just because of the numbers. So, and that's something to be aware of. That's probably my downside. So, when you turn down people on a phone call, you think, well, maybe they would have made money. Oh yeah, there they are playing Wembley Stadium. But it's you've got to think about your sanity as well, I think.
How important is it to be adaptable?
I think being adaptable is really important. I mean, you know, I think I've always tried to do that. You know, when I started doing what I do, I would never have thought that I'd want to manage anyone. So I never thought that I'd want to publish anyone. I never thought I wanted to do the art direction for someone. I never thought I wanted, you know, do millions of the things I've ever done. But actually, some of them are really enjoyable. I mean, there's not a boring side, like the downside. I'm dealing with lawyers, but hey.
Contract
there's another thing you could.
PRS.
Yeah. Another. Yeah.
So, but you only ever want to be a rock and roll star, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the end of the day, I was still a rock and roll star in my head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. So, what's your next view?
I think. Well, it's going to be tough for the next. I mean, we've got this problem with, which is I call the pack of cards effect, that you've got a myriad of. I keep using the word myriad, cliche. Okay, let's use it again. Myriad. You've got loads and loads and loads and loads of bands who were going to play live this year. We got one. We've cancelled the tour. It's moved to April next year. The dates are still there. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But that's just one example, and there's hundreds and hundreds of bands at every level, from, like, you know, playing the 100 Club all the way up to Wembley Stadium, who have cancelled or moved their shows into 2021. So 2021 is going to be really weird for us lot, because if you had got a new band or a band who are in the studio recording, and let's say we try and release a record when it gets a bit better, April, the jury's out on April, jury's out in July, jury's out on next year, really. But I think you're going to get this knock-on effect where there's going to be, next year is going to be almost like extra time in a football match, where you're just going to have the same players on the field but just a little bit tired, and it's just you're going to have a whole year which is like watching extra time in a World Cup match, right? Because there will be some results, could be a bit laborious, and hopefully it won't go to penalties. It's the same thing, and I don't even like football, but there's the analogy. But then hopefully when that's over, we get into a new competition, and that I can't see happening till the live circuit comes back fully. Will that come back before a vaccine? Depends how many people survive it and how much we know about whether people can get it twice. etc., etc. So, but festivals are going to be key next year.
Yeah.
If festivals don't happen, the knock-on effects are big. I mean, and obviously you've got the whole scenario that, of course, a lot of people watching this or listening to this may not realise that if a band does a festival in a big slot, they usually have to have some sort of exclusivity agreement. The exclusivity agreement means that they shouldn't really be playing around that thing. So poor old Freddie Mercury's moved his tour to September. He's sold out all these dates, right? And then he's not going to get any festivals, even if they do come back, because someone's not going to put him on if he doesn't cancel his shows. Because so that is going to be weird next year, because if the festivals do happen, I don't know at what level they happen or what lineups they're going to get, or even one. So
it would be weird if Freddie Mercury's doing them.
It would be good. Well, you know, if miracles happen,
well, yeah.
We're looking for a miracle as big as Freddie Mercury happening, really.
So right, adaptability. Look at where things are growing. There are parts of the industry that impacted, but not as much. And I've been reading a lot about revenge consumption.
Right.
There's an expectation that when things go back to a form of normality, everybody will want to have tickets. I haven't been to a gig in a toilet show for a long time. You know, like the Joiners. I can't wait to get to a gig in the Joiners again. And so there's this expectation of revenge consumption happening. I think, and the other thing is, how do you turn consumption of streaming into consumption of product that actually makes money for artists?
That's the big question for us lot. You know, that's on the wall. That's always a problem, because you know, when you see a royalty statement, it's 100 pages long, and at the end of it says £14.98 because it's streaming. It's depressing. So all of our objective really is, how do we turn that around? Now, obviously, physical product is great, but you know, great to an extent, but it doesn't really make that much money unless you're in the selling 10,000 unit brigade, which is mad, isn't it? Because we're saying 10,000 units as if that's a lot, when, you know, take Kid A by Radiohead, it did 120,000 week one physically. Yeah. And that isn't that long ago.
Yeah, no.
Well, 21 years ago, but yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of embracing going on. I think everyone's going to have to really think long and hard when this does actually get better, because as you said, there is going to be an appetite to come back out, and there's going to be a problem, because there'll be bottlenecks wherever you want. There'll be bottlenecks with venues, bottlenecks with production, bottlenecks with making records and CDs. There'll be bottlenecks everywhere, because once those shops become visited frequently again, and people haven't got to worry, and then bands are on tour, it's going to be a really hard one. And I think we're all going to have to work really hard and really think hard of how to do exactly what you said, because you know, for me, the best way of getting rid of streaming is to turn the bloody stuff off, because I think I always think it's an incredibly, if it was a car industry, everyone would have lost their jobs, right? Because essentially you've got all the majors all deciding that it's a great idea to more or less give their music away to a radio that you decide what you play on.
Yeah.
And when you think that the same companies are still writing out checks and transferring money to radio pluggers to get records on the radio, why are they letting people listen to a whole album rather than just a single on Spotify? So even though Spotify is, you know, for a punter, brilliant, can't complain. It's always puzzled me why all you really want is the band's greatest hits. You want the greatest hits and the singles on Spotify, because really the third track on the fourth album that wasn't that great isn't going to do you a lot of good. So you'd be better off to sell the physical record or download that record. So that's maybe one way that it could happen. That maybe what we're seeing is a shake-up of the logic that has completely, for me at my age, completely sidestepped me for years.
Way Bandcamp has grown is quite interesting. It's being more embraced by the public. Of course, it's just musicians supporting musicians, but now it's actually reaching out to the public. I
think Bandcamp's a great example and it sort of does roughly what you've been talking about. Because the good thing is, the first thing is that in a lot of cases you're actually paying the artist directly, or you're paying a smaller team of people directly. But at the same time, it's a good one because it's also quite good, that thing of like when you buy something physically, you get gifted the digital.
Yeah.
Now that happens when you buy on Amazon, which is sometimes, I mean, actually part of that is great because of course you want to listen to it, but if you buy it just means that maybe what we need to start doing is start going, well, what we need is people to buy something. Doesn't matter what it is, they need to buy something before they get any music. And I think where Spotify fails artists is that you don't have to buy anything. So absolutely nothing. I mean, you can subscribe to not get the adverts. Big deal.
If Spotify was more like Netflix and actually invested back and had a production house type approach, you'd have a sense of something, a sense of investment about it. Fans investing in their artists, the industry investing in the artists. But to me, it's just basically takes. I can't stand Spotify. Although I use Spotify all the time.
With my manager's hat on, Spotify is really important, because and it's great because there is the side that a band goes out on tour and someone can go online and listen to the album before they go to the gig. They don't have to buy anything. But without gigs, and as time goes on, is that a good thing, or would it be better just to have like 2 tracks of each band that I think essentially Spotify is fantastic, but what Spotify doesn't do, is one, not just Spotify, but any of those, any streaming service in the world. What they don't do is they don't manipulate, and they don't manipulate because they haven't got the infrastructure to do it or allow the bands to do it. But how we do it all the time in the world of marketing, and in other industries we do it all the time. Like we drip feed stuff. You can do this, you can do that. But in music, it's like, here's the band's catalogue free of charge. Listen away. And of course, great if you're trying to discover bands, but sometimes you do get put off. So it is difficult. And I think you're right. The Netflix model, well, Netflix has been great for the industry of making programs, because as TV dwindles, and and one thing that we all have to realise is the competition. People always get competition wrong. Mm-hmm. They don't always get competition wrong, but a lot of people, friends and stuff do. So years and years and years ago, a mate of mine who's an actor summed it up brilliantly, because he said to me, he goes, the problem is with cinema. It doesn't. The problem with theatre is it had its head in its sand and never ever took cinema as being its competition, because it's a different thing. But actually, entertainment is just one thing. So when we were little, our £6.25 a week that we could spend on having fun was what? Alcohol, records, possibly girls or boys. But the now, the £50 a week the kids have. What's first? What's the first thing that goes out the 50 quid? Mobile phone bill, probably. Then so I think sometimes we have to take stock of what the competition is for our time. And money's money, so you've only got a finite amount. So to suddenly ask people to jump back in and spend £25 on a record rather than listening to it on Spotify is a big ask.
Yeah, true.
For a kid.
Really. Apart from the multi-millionaires. Anyway, that's fantastic, Doug. Loads of great stuff there. Thank you for your time.